This week, the Valor Flight Crew podcast welcomes Jamie Moran and Jonna Meyer from the Station 10 Foundation.
One of the things we're working on here in the state of Missouri, which I'm super excited about, we've already got our rough draft of our bill out, is we are pushing to make Missouri the first state that mandates healthcare violence reporting, same as child abuse, adult abuse, and neglect. Because here's the thing, right? We need the data. And sometimes we just, as providers, we need that little kick of like, oh, crap, yeah, I got to do this, right? Because you run a child abuse case, you're like, oh, I got a hotline. We know we got a hotline. Right. But then also, too, we've identified, unfortunately, just different organizations that put in the roadblocks and put hindrances and make it difficult for those stories to really get out because it's easier to sweep under the rug, whether it be for patient satisfaction or metrics or you name it, right? Mm-hmm. And so now that we take away that from them, they no longer can this issue be pushed under the rug. And so, unfortunately, hey, I'm sorry, we got to get legislation to do it, but and I tell everybody all the time, we're done with this shit. We're done.
Welcome back to the Valor Flight Crew podcast. In this episode, we're talking about something that continues to impact healthcare providers across every setting, from the emergency department to ground EMS, and especially in the air medical environment, and that's violence against healthcare workers. We are joined by Jamie Moran and Jonna Meyer for an honest and powerful conversation about what providers are experiencing in the field right now. We dive into personal stories, how the landscape of healthcare changed after COVID, and why reporting, awareness, and education are critical if we want to create safer working environments. This discussion goes beyond statistics. We talk about the emotional toll these encounters take, the cumulative effects of stress and trauma, and the importance of peer support, communication, and de-escalation skills, especially in high-risk, high-acuity environments like HEMS. This episode isn't just about identifying the problem. It's about starting conversations, building resilience, and supporting the people who show up every day to care for others. Thank you to our sponsors, Precision Aviation Group, Metro Aviation, Spectrum Aeromed.
Welcome to the Valor Flight Crew podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts and Vertical Valor magazine. Produced in partnership with Echo, Every Coast Helicopter Operations. The Valor Flight Crew podcast promotes the personnel and life-saving equipment behind helicopter air ambulance services. Join hosts Mike Fideli and Blake Schreider for in-depth interviews and expert insights from air medical personnel, pilots, communication specialists, and maintenance crews who play critical roles in airborne emergency response.
Line 1 accepting.
Copy, Line 1, gotcha, accepting. You're going to be talking to Red Feather 1 on LCEMS.
And welcome back to the Valor Flight Crew podcast. I'm Blake Schreider here with Mike Fideli, and we're your hosts of this show. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, Blake. How about yourself?
Yeah, I can't complain. The weather's super nice.
Aren't you getting cold again down there?
Only a little bit.
Only a little bit, yeah.
No heat, though.
I'm fresh back from vacation. It was 80s in southern Florida, and it was even hotter on the boat. So I was a happy camper and had a great vacation. But tomorrow's back to the real world. We're going back to work.
Yeah, oh,
not
man.
Really ready for it. I came home to a blizzard, though, so that was
that always puts the vacations in perspective,
Yeah, had to cut the vacation a little bit short to make sure I got home before the storm. So here we are.
Well, we're glad you're here, and I'm glad that I had nothing to do with you not getting your palm trees and sunshine this time.
It's not your fault this time. There will be more.
It probably will be. Well, we have a great show for this week. This is a topic, Mike, that I think you and I have talked about at the early onset when we set out to do this podcast. And we have a couple of our friends on today that are really kind of pioneers in kind of really leading the way and bringing more light to this topic about violence in healthcare and how all of us in healthcare are affected, whether we're being, physically assaulted, battered, verbally. There's all kinds of things that we have seen. And unfortunately, in our industry, there's been some tremendous losses, injuries, things like that. So this has been kind of a topic that's been kind of close to my heart. And with our guests on today, they're really going to bring some great education and insight on where we're at, how things are, and how we can move forward and really do better for ourselves. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jamie Moran and Jonna Meyer.
Hey guys, thanks for having us.
How are you guys?
Great.
Welcome, guys, to the show. Really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about this. This is something that I think we've almost seemed to normalize in our industry, and it's just not okay. And I think that we're finally starting to shed a little bit more light on the situation and starting to have more conversations that need to be had. And so I really appreciate you guys coming on and joining us. I know this is something that both of you are super passionate about, and I can't wait to bring this to our listeners as well, because I think it's something that will really resonate with all of them as well.
And it's nice too, especially, every humble person especially in the flight industry, will never think of themselves above or, anybody else. But so many people in the industry, that aren't in flight, metaphorically, put intended, to look up to a lot of the flight providers, and especially for them to really push this issue to where they came from. And help those out that, help those people out to help them get into the industry that they're in. It speaks volumes as well.
Absolutely. And, this can happen to any of us at any time, and for all of us to get into the flight world, we've had to start somewhere, Jamie, and you bring up such a valid point on how it gets there. So before we get into that, Jamie, can you just give us a quick intro about yourself and how you kind of came about to being involved with Echo as well?
Yeah, so I'm Jamie Moran from Kansas City, Missouri. Work for the Kansas City, Missouri Fire Department. And then I just, as of this last month, started my first flight job.
Congratulations.
Heck yeah.
So I guess I'm a late bloomer out of my Echo cohort. But no, I was in the...
Better late than never.
Yeah. Bumping those numbers up.
That's it.
I was the Echo 2024 cohort. With you fine gentlemen, with your tutelage. No, so I've been a paramedic for 10 years now. I've been in EMS, whatever, crap, I gotta do math, whatever 2009 was, basically since then, as an EMT before. And other than that, I just enjoy being a servant of others, along with riding my motorcycle and my Jeep and annoying Jonna whenever I can. That's really my true profession in life that I've found. And it doesn't pay as well, but it pays in other ways.
He's become an expert at that.
Anyone who knows you, Jamie, knows that comes naturally to you.
Goodness.
Jonna, can you go and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I have been a nurse going on, like 17, 18 years. I started in the NICU, did NICU for 4.5, 5 years. Pediatrics became my passion, and so I went into a pediatric neonatal transport role. I literally just hung up my helmet back in December after 12.5 years at that career. It's a very hard job, as you guys know, in flight and just on the body, mentally, all of it. And I am currently expanding into a Monday through Friday soft nursing role. But it is also very hard, but also rewarding. I still get to attend some traumas and chart reviews and things like that. And like Jamie, we like to travel. We like to hike. I love to do yoga. I'm big in the peer support aspect of things and yoga for first responders, which I'm sure we'll dive into on this episode. So,
and Jonna, also, if my memory serves correct, you're also a mentor for some of the past future flight crew cohorts as well, for being a resource in your area.
Yeah, so I mentored 2, and then one was locally from this last cohort, and so I believe she just had an interview this past week with one of our mid-Missouri flight teams. So I think it was her first interview. So we'll see what happens next.
Awesome.
And I can only imagine trying to mentor Jamie into getting into the roles. No small feats, right?
Oh, no small feats. Nope. But you know what?
They say nothing's impossible if you put your mind to it.
Yeah. But you know what? As much trouble as he gives me, I give him just as much back in other areas. So it's a two-way street there.
She doesn't listen worth a damn. We're going to have to get hearing aids or something.
Selective hearing, I think, is what that's called.
Yeah.
Trust me, I'm an expert.
As I'm sure our listeners can figure out by now, Jonna and Jamie do actually like each other outside of here and outside of work. So maybe Jamie. All right. Okay.
I mean, he is banished to the basement right now. So. For this podcast.
It's cold. It's white walls back here. Like it's just
prison.
Nothing wrong with that. You got to show him his boss, Jonna. Well, let's get into it. So before we kind of go down the pike, we like to start off with an impactful story, maybe that you guys have from your careers that really kind of exemplifies why this is something that's such a huge passion of yours, and why you guys have started to be pioneers in changing what this industry is doing when we have violence against us as EMS providers.
For me, it was, unfortunately, and I don't know, we could always look back and Monday morning quarterback ourselves, but, we look at these situations and we see something getting worse from a mile out, right? And that's our job as providers, whether it be in a helicopter or in the back of an ambulance. We are supposed to be thinking a few steps ahead. That's what makes us, I would argue, competent clinicians. But then, of course, there's always those operational issues that you can see becoming a problem. Name the industry, name this, the forward thinkers in it, and you look at it and say, this is becoming a problem. And for me, it finally took a coworker getting killed. We look at those situations and we say, hey, this is a problem. This is a problem. This is a problem. And for us, it was finally when we had a coworker stabbed to death. That was it for me. And so here in Kansas City, in April of last year, in 2025, we had a firefighter paramedic, Graham Hoffman, phenomenal individual, phenomenal human, great, public servant, transporting a patient, and he was stabbed right through his own heart. And he made it a little bit enough for family to get in and say their goodbyes that they shouldn't have had to say. And then we lost him and we buried him a week later. And healthcare violence has always been not a passion for me as far as, something I enjoy, but something that it never sat well with me. And, through different avenues, I've always spoken out against it, but unfortunately, it's such a common occurrence, such an accepted part of culture and healthcare now that you never really have a platform to stand on to do it. It's, it's like saying hey, I don't really like getting wet in the rain. Well, you're going to get wet in the rain.
Right.
But unfortunately now it's, now to be able to look at this and say, this is what happens. It's not just bumps. It's not just bruises. It's not just burnout. It's not just reduced staffing. It's death of your friends, death of your coworkers. And, finally we were able to, and Jonna knows this too, but we were able to just finally sit down and say, what do we do with this? We cannot let this just continue to be part of the culture. This has to start something.
Jamie, I think for all of our listeners and everybody, we're all pretty familiar with this incident involving Graham. And I just remember reading this and just, I mean, even now I feel this lump in my throat. I feel these tears in my eyes and just my heart just breaks. And I hate so much that it takes incidents like these for not us as the coworkers and friends, but for those people, the 1,000-mile out kind of look, the overhead, why does it take that for there to be action, and not that none of these should ever have anybody's name go in vain. But it hurts to just see that that's unfortunately what it takes to really open and bring that to light for other people to understand that this is truly what can happen. The ultimate horrible sacrifice is losing a life. That's what it takes, for this to be more light to be shed on this subject. It hurts.
And this is it's never to say that no risk should be there, right? Everybody knows when the rotors of that aircraft start up and you go in the air, there is risk. Every firefighter will know when you walk in a house that's on fire, there is risk. Every law enforcement officer, that gets in a dangerous situation will tell you there is risk. What always seems to make it hard to stomach is in something like this, in such interpersonal violence like this, we were there to help. We weren't there to arrest anybody. We weren't there to upset somebody. And that's how, so all of healthcare violence is. Nobody is there to make it your worst day. We're there to help make your worst day a better day. And to experience that type of violence, just trying to be in service of a stranger is what just, like, you know, like, and Mike, I'm sure, and Jonna knows, it twists you and makes you angry and makes you sad, and sometimes just leaves you speechless.
Yeah, I don't think any of us ever once got into a life of service thinking that would be the end result, right? Like not a single one of us has that. We all want to strive to do better. We all want to strive to make a difference in someone's life. And when you are there to do that, and there's something like this that happens, like it really just creates this cascade of events, and not just the physical events, the emotional events that go along with that. And it really just takes you down a bad path. And it's like you get to the point where you hear this over and over and over and over again. And you're like, why am I doing this? Why am I still putting myself in this situation? And it really becomes hurtful long term in many more ways than, you know, getting yelled at by a patient, right? You know, and it came down to this for Graham. And I just, you know, my heart goes out to you know, to his family and all of coworkers, and you guys are, I mean, you guys are extended family. I can't imagine having to deal with that from something that is so senseless and something that absolutely did not need to happen, and there's no excuse for. Absolutely not. It has been great though to see the spark his memory has ignited, because so many people, when we've heard it, and it's true, like thousands of healthcare providers across the country didn't know Graham, but they knew Graham. Right.
And it's been that, as a, you know, John and I have met and talked with his mother, and it's just, you can see the relief even on her face, is that like she realized her baby boy's death was not for nothing.
Right.
It should have happened.
Right.
But it has, you can tell just in talking with healthcare providers across the country, like we are tired of this shit. We're done.
And Jonna, you know, coming from the hospital, you know, you said you were in NICU, PICU, is that correct?
NICU for 5 years first, and then
NICU?
into the transport realm. Yeah.
Even in the hospital, and Mike, you can attest to this as well. Like it starts just from like probably places you would least expect. And maybe Jonna, like it doesn't have, like, you've had to interact with family members. You've probably encountered tough cases, especially in the NICU, to where people all of a sudden are in your face, angry or upset because of something that's happening with their child, you know, and then that can also lead to those assaults, those threats, those things on us, when we really are just there trying to do our job to serve others.
Thank you to our sponsor, Spectrum Aeromed. Every mission starts with the right equipment. Spectrum Aeromed designs advanced, customizable medical interiors for rotor and fixed-wing aircraft, helping crews care for patients safely and efficiently in the air. Discover more at spectrum-aeromed.com.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to we're pediatrics. It's already like it's a scary world to work in. And then you're meeting these parents specifically on one of their worst days of their lives, most likely, whether it's their coming first day into the NICU, or I can remember going down to a small town in the helicopter that we go to all the time, and a dad just like very upset that, one, he couldn't ride with us, and two, it was COVID times, and COVID obviously changed so many things, but we had to say, hey, like, he had this other son there that we are like, hey, there's no visitors allowed. This is the rules. And that was when, like, yeah, what do? I'm a 5'2", 120-pound woman, and there's this man standing up next to me, like cussing me out, like, I'm bringing my son and I'm coming with you. And so, like, having to take a step back, take a breath, and then be like, quick, you know, one, you don't want to be like, get back in their face and be like, listen here, sir. But also you have to remember it's their worst, it's their worst day ever. And so, those are the things that you have to think about. It's not always the patients, it's the family members, it's their friends, it's people you might just meet out on the sidewalk next to EMS on scene. It's a very weird role to be in, and you're not taught anything about it in nursing school.
I think Oren paramedic school. I don't really remember any teaching or training on it. And I can echo what you were saying, Jonna, about, especially when it comes to dealing with our pediatric patients and when we're trying to transport them, a lot of times, I think as, especially in the HEMS world, not all aircraft can accommodate, bringing the family member, and if there's a will and there's a way, like, I think for all of us, we don't want to, keep a parent from their child, but there are also incidents where, the severity of the illness or injury of the child, like you put that parent, they'll tell you they're fine. And then you put them, like for our aircraft to 135, and, we try to accommodate when we can, but we don't want to put a risk of that parent being up front and then emotions happen that they suddenly feel overwhelmed or they're worried or maybe the patient condition changes. And as you try to communicate that, there's just an added inherent risk. And that doesn't do any of us any good if we can't get to where we're going safely.
Yeah. And that's what's so hard in the pediatric world is because it's a very family-centered care facility. And so, which it should be, but like you said, like, we would only take a parent in the helicopter if we knew that patient wasn't going to survive. And so I would say that to families, like, hey, your family member's fine. Like, we only take parents if I think your child is going to not make it through this ride. And I would have to kind of spin it a little bit. And that would kind of calm them down, because that's where a lot of our pushback with parents and escalation of moods came from, them not being able to ride with us, or the weight limit on the fixed wing. Right. So there was that issue as well. And so just learning how to just take a breath, calm them down, calm yourself down, and figuring out, hey, let's get to the real issue. It's not the riding. It's not this. It's they're scared and don't know what's going to happen next.
Right.
And I think it's two very different realms that we're talking about. Jamie, you being pre-hospitally and Jonna working, mostly in the hospital or in the transport world. And it's two different conversations that have to happen. And sometimes, Jamie, you're showing up on a scene that, you may not have police showing up on that scene already. And you're jumping into a situation that seemingly should be pretty harmless. And then it turns into a different direction. That communication style that you're talking about, Jonna, being able to have that conversation and really talk them through and address what their fears are to be able to calm them down in that situation, that doesn't often work in the EMS world. And so you guys certainly have very different perspectives on this topic, which is why I think it's such a great way to have this discussion, being able to bring in both sides of that conversation and to have that really that breadth of information coming from both sides. So.
And working in the hospital too, it's almost, I found myself, I have working in an ER for, coming up on 8 years. I found myself getting assaulted more in the hospital setting because I get comfortable. At least, I've always found myself when I'm on the streets, I'm expecting to find weapons. I'm expecting crowds of people. I'm expecting it. In the hospital, I'm like, oh, they've been screened by security. Oh, it's room to, like, I'm in my nice little fluorescent lit comfortable bubble, nothing can go wrong, popped right in the face,
Right?
Yeah. Well, you're right. We do. We let our guard down.
And man, talking about, the state of where we are right now, I remember, when I first started in this field 20 years ago, you would see security at the hospital, might be the retirement gig, little old man, he's got the whistle, in the mace, like you're just doing the rounds, making sure everything's good. But now, I mean, they're full on carrying firearms, wearing bulletproof vests. They have to. I mean, we've just seen such an uptick of just shootings and violence and things that happen, especially in the hospital. I mean, I know the system that we're at. I mean, they have taken such extraordinary measures to just keep everybody safe, and everybody gets screened. Everybody gets wanded. Even our unconscious, unresponsive patients, we walk in, they get the wand, just because, I mean, predominantly, on the aircraft, our patients are pretty well, can be exposed, but we still miss things.
Yep.
Florida's, kind of a Wild West, and everybody's got a firearm somewhere, and it gets missed, like our focus is to like treat that patient and save them, like our primary job isn't to frisk the patient down. I can tell you, that's not the first thing on my mind when I'm walking in to take care of a patient. But
I'm just waiting for the day that you find like a baby alligator stuffed up in somebody's like, because there have been plenty of times I've taken codes or unresponsive patients and, you start pulling clothes and that firearm falls off. I'm waiting for the Florida man brings alligator to the ER store. Like,
it's got like a pet, like, iguana or raccoon, like in there.
Support alligator.
Yeah. Oh, it's coming.
Yeah. Lizard.
Yep, exactly. So true.
But it took. I think we all have those experiences in our career, whether that be pre-hospital or in the hospital, where we have had that exposure in kind of the wrong ways, right? Like when I think back to when I was a baby EMT and first started in EMS, I was working in a very suburban type environment. None of this stuff was talked about in EMT school. We were all there to help everybody. Everybody was always happy to see us. Like there was nothing that, really we worried about. And I didn't work in any of the cities at that point. But then when I went away to college, I continued to do EMS on the side. And I was working in more of an urban environment then. And I was like, why are so many of my coworkers wearing bulletproof vests? Like, I don't understand this. And it wasn't mandatory. It was just something that they were doing for themselves, and started having some more real conversations, and then had a few experiences where I was like, I thought police were going to show up on this. And they're like, oh no, they only respond if they have a unit available. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, shouldn't this be happening automatically? And they're like, oh no, they only respond if they have a unit available. And I'm like, okay, something isn't right about this. And finally had to start taking my own safety into my own hands.
It's like the old Simpsons meme where he's like, I'm in danger.
100%. That was what happened. Yep, 100%.
So either John or Jamie, whichever, what kind of data or what kind of statistics do you show, or are people reporting more? Are incidents just happening more? Like, is there just this all of a sudden upward trend of assaults, or is it just being now finally more accepted, or people were reporting? Where are we at with this data that we're kind of seeing? I'm
going to let Jamie take that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a yes and no. Great question, Blake. And I'm not going to say I can really give you a great political answer on it, but here's the actual truth. Because we've heard the discussion of, is there an uptick, or are we just discussing it more? And the answer I will say to that is both. We are discussing it more. Social media is playing a huge aspect in that. People are getting their stories out. We're seeing this happen. However, some of the work we are doing with our foundation here in the city is working with our local police department and their STEM center, and they do a lot of ideology-based tracking of their crimes. And we have, across the different STEM centers throughout the country, seen a very large uptick in healthcare violence, ideology-based, since COVID. A distrust in the system, a distrust in healthcare, a distrust in authority that has significantly been rooted since 2020. So yes, we are not only seeing it discussed more, we are actually seeing the data and seeing this pretty significant uptick in it. The problem with that is, though, it is still so underreported. And that is something, obviously, we can get into as we talk a little bit more about the foundation. But if anybody is listening to this podcast, and if you only take one thing away other than pediatrics are just small adults, right, Jonna?
Wow. Shot across the bow.
Yeah.
I have a feeling he's going to be in the basement a lot longer tonight.
Yeah, there's a bed down there.
But if you take away anything, it's report it. This is not part of the culture, and I, especially working in the fire industry and fire and EMS, I relate this to a lot of the fire guys of, in the 1920s and the 1930s, and before, fatalities from large structure fires were just a thing, right? If something caught on fire, you assumed at least one person was going to die. And we said, oh, well, we tried, but it's just, that's part of the game. That's part of the culture. People die in fires. And guess what? We invented fire code. Yeah. And now people don't die in fires at near the rates that we see. 80% of, mixed departments are EMS versus their fire calls, right? So I've refused to accept this idea of it's just part of the culture and we can't change it. Like we did that with fire and look where we are, right?
Right.
Even look at the aviation industry. If you want to bring it back home to a lot of our viewers here, like, you know, we just assumed that helicopters and planes went in the sink all the time and there was nothing we can do about it. All of a sudden we made a safety culture and said, hey, if we just slow it down and look at this, we could have significant impact. The same goes for healthcare violence. Like, oh no, it's very much preventable. Like, but we have to start reporting it. The solution to it is going to be significantly data driven, and we need the data. And we don't get the data unless we start reporting it. So if anybody takes anything away from this, please report it.
And I think to piggyback off that is, like he said, report it and know that most states, and we're working with lawyers that, and hopefully eventually that we'll find a lawyer in every state to help, to tell this point to it. Some people don't want to report it because they say management says, no, don't. If you just go tell security will take care of that information. No, call your police, call your sheriff in your county and report it. Management can't tell you and your hospital can't tell you that you're not allowed to report it. Or on the EMS side, same thing. And so what's really cool in our area and on our board is we do have a sheriff. And if we have an incident in a certain county, we're just like, here's the business card. Like, they can't stop you. It's illegal. So.
And I love that you're saying to report it, because it obviously needs to be known about a lot more. And I think that kind of brings into the next kind of topic of discussion is, what exactly are we reporting? So like, what is constituting violence against EMS or healthcare workers in this field? Because I think everybody very much has a very different definition of what that is. I think when we think of violence against healthcare workers, most people gravitate towards the physical side of things. But that doesn't always mean that that's what it is. You can be verbally berated by a patient or a family member, and that should still be considered part of that list. And so I guess I'm curious, going back to where you guys are at, and I promise I'll get back to my point here with this, but report it. That's great, but I feel like for so long, back to what I was saying earlier, we've kind of normalized all of this, because what's been more, at least from a hospital perspective, and this is one of the things that bothered me the most, it seems sometimes, was the concern was not about if the employees were safe. The concern is, what kind of scores are we going to get on our patient satisfaction? And, I can think of an instance where I was charged the one day, one of my patient's family, or one of my nurses is taking care of a patient where the family member was very upset, literally braided her up and down, left, right, and was, she was literally in the corner crying. And I went and had a discussion with that family member and explained that kind of behavior was not acceptable, that this was their warning. If it happens again, they will be removed. And I tried to talk them through what was happening and why, as far as the tests and the results and all of the things, and kind of bring them back into ground zero, but also understanding that was not going to be tolerated. And in response to that, my manager at the time took a gift certificate into the room and said, "I'm so sorry that this happened to you." It's things like that where it's like, so we've normalized this. We've now gone in so many different avenues saying that this is okay, even though we've tried to stop this behavior. And that, of course, was never reported. That was never something that was brought up. But that was clearly an episode where, yes, it was not physical, but the emotional side of things that nurse took home with her that night. Right. Because she was literally doing her best, and she was a darn good nurse to begin with. And that's the route that things went. Like, what kind of message does that send to all of them? So, like, where I go with this is, yes, we've normalized this because of the system that is there. And that is very unfortunate. And I think that's played a big role into why people are not reporting it, because they feel like, what does it matter? Right. Nobody's going to do anything about it. So, to get me back to my initial question, I promised I would come back around here again. What in from the opinion of both you guys, what do you see as those actual violence against healthcare workers? Is that just the physical? Is that the emotional? Is that the verbal? Like, where is that line drawn? And can you kind of talk through that a little bit more?
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned air medical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
I've told a lot of people in the simple, easy conversations, we can get into what, each state's legal definition is, but I can just say this. What would an air marshal drag your ass off of a jetliner for?
Okay.
Valid point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. You try some of that with a flight attendant and see how hard you're going to eat that like really nasty carpet in the middle of the aisle as they carry you out.
Yep.
And so like, that's just a good start, right? Like,
sure.
Is it acceptable behavior, right? Because people can say, well, does it influence patient care? Does it do that? Does it do that? What would you get carried off of a plane for?
Right.
And that you'd be surprised how all encompassing that really is in our line of work.
And I think too, we've been asked to track the data because like we can't make changes without us saying like, hey, this is happening in every state and every hospital and every EMS and every fire department. Every flight crew has dealt with this. And so you can't make changes until you have the data to back it up. I think also like Jamie was saying, as far as, and like you were saying, Mike, like the PTSD and the emotional damage that's created, like this is why people are leaving bedside, people are leaving the fire department. Like we are becoming more and more short staffed, and that's not just from COVID. It's because we are done. We are done. Mentally, physically, emotionally, we're done. And so, and we're also, I feel like truly there is, and maybe it's just because I have a small bubble and most of my people around me, we're having a culture change of, I am going to put my friends and family first and not this job. So if Starbucks can get $20 an hour, what else is out there? And they're safe supposedly in some areas, unless you make the wrong coffee drink, which is not right. Which is not cool that they have to deal with some difficult customers also. But why would I stay if I'm not going to be protected? If I'm going to have mental issues down the road, if I can't take care of my family, or I can't go out and turn my brain off from the job. So, but we got to have that data to back it up to make changes down the road.
I recently spoke at a conference out in Vegas, and it was all for HR personnel for hospitals, law enforcement, like cities and fire departments, right? So, and I was shocked, and we can talk about this in a bit, like how little they knew that violence in healthcare was an issue. That must just be an HR luxury. However, so in talking with a lot of them, they all assumed that reporting meant jail, arrests, right? And so, a lot of HR people, as I was discussing this with them and discussing the importance of having necessarily like internal reporting systems to be able to track some of this stuff, the first thing I would hear from them is, well, we can't just arrest everybody. That's not the solution. And I would say, yes, I agree with you 100%. The solution is not arresting everybody. I said, but let me give you guys a scenario here. I said, two very violent patients that we can encounter with in the healthcare field are seizure patients and our diabetic patients. We all understand that we may take a stray punch or something like that, and we don't take that personally.
Right.
But if we're not tracking that data, how are you then able to utilize your city or county or state health department resources to increase diabetic awareness, seizure resources in targeted areas if we're not tracking where it's occurring? And you literally just watch the light bulbs go off in their heads and just like, I never thought about that. And of course I politely just had to smile, nod, and say, of course you freaking didn't eat it. But, so yeah, by no means am I saying like, let's just press charges on everybody and everybody goes to jail. Cause I think we can all agree that that's not a solution.
No.
Right.
But we also live in 2026 where we have lots of amazing resources, but we have to be data driven in how we implement those. And we can't be data driven without data.
Yeah. And we don't get that if we don't keep track of that. Right. And like you said, it's not just putting everybody in jail or whatever, but I know for us, like, and Jamie, Mike, being in EMS, I know that we have like red flags for addresses, right? Where it will just put a clue out there that if you're responding to this address, and it doesn't mean that the patient, some of them are like, previous encounters where they were hostile towards responders, or it could just be a note of, due to this patient's condition, be aware they could become either combative or violent based off of substance abuse, like you said, seizures, diabetes, especially if, the sugar's constantly going low. It's at least a way to let us know, hey, take some extra steps, or at least you have a little bit of extra information. But also too, Jamie, like you said, about having education for these patients. Like if we know this is happening, or we know that this could be an issue, why are we not, as servants to the community, why are we not as a agency, as a community as a whole, I'm not saying singular, but how do we get resources so that they don't have to live that way, right? Or they don't have to have those constant combativeness or dealing with these medical issues? Why can't we help them get some resources so that way they can improve and have a better function in their life?
And you guys in EMS will get this, or those of us that are EMS, especially in the urban areas, get this. I tell every paramedic that I do field training for, our job is not treat and transport. Our job is to solve the problem that they called us for today. Sometimes if that patient is shot, the solution to that is a bolus of diesel to the closest trauma center. But sometimes if that patient is intoxicated, maybe we call 988 and we utilize a community responder, or we contact our state or county's mental health department and get some co-responders, and we start that process. We help problem solve. And as we discuss later about some of our courses, we talk about how that's actually a massive de-escalation factor in itself, of like validation and problem solving. We're not just contributing to the patient's stress of, all right, let's hop on an ambulance, let's take you down to the hospital, and you can wait in this chair, and somebody's going to wheel a robot in, and you can get a psych consult through basically a Zoom call.
Or it's jail or hospital, one of the two, and neither of those fix the problem.
So we partnered with a company out of St. Louis we'll discuss in a bit, but we do de-escalation and self-defense training for both fire and EMS personnel and hospital-based personnel. And we discuss a bill in New Hampshire in our hospital-based class where they try to get some increased penalties for healthcare violence. And, the bill was written very well. It had great traction. And all of a sudden, the lawmakers went and said, well, this isn't actually a problem. And of course, everybody looked at them and said, what do you mean it's not a problem? I said, well, we don't have a lot of charges. We don't have a lot of cases of this. Well, why is that? They weren't reporting it. And so look at it this way, and I tell everybody this, even with our foundation, we'll talk about in a bit, the solution is not tomorrow. The solution might be 5 years from now, if we're optimistic, because we need data. We need data to actually make good data-driven choices and plans and how to address it. And then it's not going to be overnight. But as the healthcare personnel in New Hampshire learned, if you're not reporting it, there's no data to back up any of your claims. And guess what, guys? How many times in all of our documentation have we heard, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the same goes for this as well.
Man.
But I find it so interesting, though, in that we've recognized this as a problem, right? We know that this happens to every healthcare worker out there, no matter what, position you may hold in the healthcare realm. Why do we not have a national database, or do we have a national database to be able to collect some of these things so that we're all working with the same definition, reporting the same things, talking about the same events? And why are we relying on each of the individual organizations and agencies to interpret that data as they will?
So, have you guys heard about the Station 10 Foundation?
So apparently this leads us into something else.
I'm going to do that thing, Mike, where we start here and then we work our way around and we get back to our original question.
I'm ready for it. Bring it on.
Taking a page out of your book. So I referenced earlier of deciding it was time to do something different. My friends in healthcare had always said hey, you've kind of been the loudest voice in the room on this. You should be doing more. You should be doing more. I'm like, well, okay, great. I'm not busy enough already. But, I had those discussions with Jonna of where do we even start, right? And so it's actually, we have a really great, in our fire department, we do have good fire administration. They are good people. We do have a very good union, but unfortunately, sometimes there's just things that can't be solved in the bureaucracy of unions or city halls, or just that doesn't mean that there's not a solution. It just means we got to take a different route other than that one. what really started it was I run our fire department's, our fire station social media page, the KCFD Station 10 Facebook page. I just really wanted to engage with the community on it, post pictures of our fires, have funny memes, just allow the community to kind of see what we do. And in May of last year for Nurses Week, I had talked to a lot of my friends and got different stories of assaults in healthcare, right? And so we made this little collage of about, I think I had maybe 100 made, but I picked the top, I think 40 or 50. There was just stories of nurses that had been assaulted, right? Having urine thrown on them for not bringing a sandwich fast enough. There was a story of a nurse that was internally decapitated after an assault. There were some just horrendous things. This post went viral. It got over 25,000 shares. We had nurses from across the country sending thank you cards, sending cookies, you name it, to the station, just as a, oh my God, thank you. Somebody is finally, you could tell that there was a breath of fresh air for them. And I was kind of blown away. We were really blown away about it at the station. So that's where the name of the Station 10 Foundation came from, was really bringing back this idea of, I don't care if you're in an ambulance, I don't care if you're in a hospital, I don't care if you're in a clinic, we're in this together. And the idea, it was such a relief to see these, in regards to nurses and healthcare, like hospital-based healthcare personnel, just the idea that the fire department had their back, right? And they were like, hey, our friends out there get it. Maybe we shouldn't cuss them out, every time they come in the ER smelling like fire. But all jokes aside, we really wanted to focus on the unity of all healthcare personnel. And, that's where we decided to start. With that being said, here were some of our goals. We really utilized what we called our 3-pillar approach and how we're going to solve this issue. First, bringing awareness. So the idea, and as we've learned, surprisingly, the general public does not know this is an issue, because the general public, A, does not think like people that want to assault healthcare workers, and B, don't work in healthcare. So unless you have either punched a nurse or are related to a nurse who has been punched, you'd be surprised how many people do not know this. So just bringing awareness to this issue on multiple levels, state, county, and local, and then working with our social media campaign. Step 2 being, we really wanted to work on training initiatives. And so we really said, we partnered with a company called VEST, V-E-S-T, Violent Encounter Survival Training, out of St. Louis, to work on our de-escalation and self-defense. But then also too, we have, his name is Chad Daly. He's a 30+ year safety chief for Kansas City. He's done deployments to Ground Zero. He's done deployments to Hurricane Katrina. He's done it and he's seen it. He runs his own training company. He's always thinking and evaluating every situation. How can we get better from this? And so I really wanted him on our board, to bring him on to utilize that training aspect. And so not only doing the hands-on and de-escalation training, but policy review, looking back at past incidences, being able to do some of these critical incident debriefs and say, hey, how can we get better? But with that too, utilizing a reporting system. And then third being our wellness initiative, which we'll talk about in a minute, since we have the queen of it here on the podcast with us. But so to say that, Mike, some of the work we've been doing with our local legislature on the county and especially on the state levels, and then actually from the national level. So we have here in Kansas City, we split a state line between Kansas and Missouri. So we have a really great organization called the Mid-America Regional Council, which is basically a 9-county-wide babysitter for us to just say, for them to say like, hey, geniuses, they're doing it this way right here. We don't care if there's a state line. How can we unify the area and work together regardless of a state line? They do amazing work in our community. And so we have a lobbyist named Jason, who's become a very good friend and mentor to me. And so we are working with the Patient Safety Organization, otherwise known as the PSO, who is a national, they do, near miss meds, all sorts of things to really track trends. And I looked at Jason one day and said, hey, like PSO is already doing a lot of this kind of tracking on different issues on national levels. Why could we not create a standardized form for this? And he's like, that's a great question. Let me talk to my guy. And so he talked to his guy and he came back and said, hey, yeah, we can do that. No problem. So, which has been great. So we have got the kind of the rough draft of a form that can be rolled out through PSO and utilize them as a central organization for all of the data tracking. to be able to do this because a lot of it is queryable, right? Like factors contributing to time of day, all the different things that we need to actually see the trends. We need to actually see some of the data in that. And Daniel from PSO has done a great job of creating a form that really, takes maybe 10 minutes to fill out, but I'm excited to see where it goes. So, Mike, to answer, coming back an hour later to answer that, like we are working on that because yes, there is the need of insert township ambulance here, insert hospital here, insert large city fire department here, right? I'm glad you guys are attempting to track this, but we've got to have a pretty good dose of standardization to be able to get actual good data and look at trends throughout the country on it.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
I think bringing all that together to make sure that you have reliable data is probably that huge first step to making sure that it is actionable data, to make sure that it can really make great changes, to make sure that we're recording it appropriately and seeing where there's needs and how resources can be put in place to help people, whether it be patients or us, the healthcare workers, to make sure that we can be healthy and safe. We talked a little bit earlier that it's not just COVID, right? And how many, I feel like it's the term that's always going to come back for the rest of our lives that I'm alive is there's so much blame for COVID. Man, I think there is a lot. It changed a whole lot of way of life. I mean, there were so many things that were never done remotely before that suddenly now we're done remotely.
I'm still living kind of, in Avengers, the blip, right? They called it the blip when they disappeared for 5 years. That's how I still feel about COVID. I'm like, it was a blip. It was 2019.
It was.
And then it's 2026. And I'm like, what happened? Who snapped their fingers? Did I disappear? Like it was still just such a blur.
You're very correct on that because it really seems like, did we do that? Did we really just wear suits and masks like 24/7 for everything?
Yes.
But I remember kind of the post-mask-ish kind of era of like late 2021, maybe into 2022 kind of, where COVID was still a big thing, but some things were starting to get kind of relaxed, right? But I just remember this huge, at least locally, such a huge uptick in just overdose and substance abuse, right? And there was just such this blame on it. It was just this fentanyl and all this stuff, but it's like it just became this other pandemic within a pandemic, and just seeing so many mental health, substance abuse, and I mean, obviously the number one thing, alcohol and intoxication, right? I mean, it's probably in 90% of our calls, and probably more ways than we don't even probably realize, right? In ways that we encounter our patients. But I don't know, maybe I'm the only one, but it just felt like there was this, like, we kind of got through that COVID-ish, and then it just seemed there was just this huge uptick in all these substance abuse problems, which really led into a lot of these encounters with people under the influence of things. And it really just kind of spread, I think, at least in our area, of what the heck is going on. And we're getting threatened. We're getting assaulted. We're getting things thrown at us, whether you're in the arriving by aircraft or even in the hospital, especially in the hospital, I don't know. Am I the only one that thinks there was just such this huge, like,
Blake, let's call it what it was. Let's like, and this is a no disrespect to those who have served our country, but let's call it what it was. Let's call it a battleground, right? Because that's what it was. We had people, just like generals in wars, make decisions that affect those beneath them. We were watching administration, whether it be hospitals or fire EMS departments, right, make decisions that didn't affect them. But let's be honest, from the comfort of their home, because they went remote, right? And so all of a sudden now we're going to ask that nurse, right, to use their phone to FaceTime family as we disconnect a patient from a ventilator because they're no longer viable. And we expect not only the healthcare worker to just be freaking fine with it, but we then expect the family to not have emotional reactions. Or God forbid, we did bring those family into the hospital, right? We had them watch from a window, right? And then we wonder why we had emotional outbursts and a nurse got punched or a tech got spit on, right? And we're just disregarding the most basic human instinct of emotion. And we let's call it what it was. We were set up for failure. We were the canaries. And by canary, I mean, literally, when this all first started, of our 6-person crews on a medical call, that was put the medic in a Tyvek suit with the monitor in the bag, send them in, and they holler out the door if they need anything because we don't want to expose our crew. Right. We were canaries. And so, yeah, like the system did not set us up for success. And then all of a sudden we wonder, like, why Jonna spoke earlier, we're tired. Like, we're tired.
I think for all of us, the toll mentally of just day in and day out, masked, wearing Tyvek suits, going out there and having to turn around and do it again and do it again. Jonna, how did you combat that?
Oh my gosh. So, I mean, I vividly remember, the whole 2-week to curb the curve, I guess, to stop the curve of everything exploding. Going to work and be like, this is great. Like, I haven't done a transport today. This is, where in our transport world, we could do 4 or 5 transports in a 12-hour shift, because we were also ground and fixed wing and helicopter. And so you're coming to work and you're like, oh, I can go catch up on my CEUs, or I can go pay my bills, or let me make a grocery list that I'm going to have delivered, when I get off shift. Right, yeah. And so initially it was great. No transports. Nobody was sick all of a sudden. Like, oh, nobody's tummy's hurt. Oh, you can take care of that fever at home. Great. Right. But guess what? Guess what exploded for us transporting? It was the mental health patients, suicide attempts, overdoses. That's what paid my paycheck, honestly. Like, because that's all we were transporting. Wow. But let me ask you this, like, do you know the number one sign of depression? It's isolation. And so we're in this world of COVID where you're supposed to isolate and stay 6 feet apart and not go see your loved one as they pass due to this virus, and maybe watch them through a window or watch them through a video screen, and expect us all to be okay with that, even if you're not in healthcare or not in EMS. But we're human beings. Beings are, beings that were meant to be together. Right. So not only did it, show us that, like, yes, we have a major mental health crisis even before COVID made it blatantly obvious. And then you add on the isolation and you add on the loss of loved ones, and you expect all of us to be okay with it. And then here's your pizza party. Here's your extra $20 an hour.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Right.
So it just brought everything to light of how bad, some of the mental health crisis is.
And I think you guys bring up such good points with, kind of what maybe exacerbated a lot of it. But I think there's the other piece of the puzzle that we've become a society where everything is at our fingertips, right? Everything is supposed to be faster. It's supposed to be more efficient. It's supposed to be immediate for us. I don't want to wait for anything. I need it right now. And COVID slowed everything down.
Or stopped.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so now you have a society that is used to having everything that they want when they want it and how they want it, to now not being able to get any of those things, which becomes very, very frustrating for someone. Whether that be their medications, whether that be healthcare, whether that be anything that we're doing in the healthcare world, And that makes people very frustrated. So if it's not bad enough that it's already this emotional situation, or that we've been isolating for, weeks now, or that a loved one is dying in the hospital, now you factor in all of this, that everything just takes exponentially longer when we've been used to having it right now. I think that that's also something that really has been a catalyst for a lot of the frustration, which then is shown in whatever we have to take as violence sometimes.
I'll tell you a story because we're all friends here. I think I would assume so. Jonna discussed isolation, and so originally, right? Like if you wanted to make money during that time, it was a great time to make money because people were going off and bonuses for staff and shifts. And what was happening at the fire department at the time was like, if there was a confirmed case, right, the whole station, that whole shift went off. And some of our, we got 12, 10, 12, 14 crew stations at some point, and overtime was easy to get. And so what was happening is that, originally it was 2 weeks off and you had to go home and quarantine. Now, I will say it was cool. Our fire department, like if you couldn't quarantine at home, they'd put you in a hotel. That sounds great, but let me tell you a story. So there was a coworker of mine that I ran that ended up dying from COVID, right? When we walked in the door, I said, as my canary with my bag of everything, it was one of those, I'm already behind the 8 ball.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I never got caught up, and we were able to get him to the hospital. And as soon as we got to the hospital, he got put on the vent and he never came off of it. And I walked out of the ER and was immediately greeted by, the white shirts, the admin. And one of them was in a Tyvek suit, and they said, hey, hop on in the back of, such and such chief's car. We know you take care of your grandpa at home, so we're going to put you in a hotel to isolate for 2 weeks. I said, well, okay. At first I was like, hey, I paid vacation. This is great, right? And so they take me to this hotel, and they said, we're going to throw it by the station, grab your bag, make a list. We can stop by your house, grab it. Here you go. I was like, okay, just like, I guess, laptop or whatever, So I went to a hotel for 2 weeks. First day was, okay. I was obviously stressed about my coworker, Billy, and I was worried about that. But I was like, okay, take the break from just the hell that we've kind of been living in. And then all of a sudden, first week into it, and Billy dies. And, the funerals were already kind of living anyway, but I didn't get to go to a funeral. Now, all of a sudden it starts that, well, what could I have done differently? And I should have done this differently. I was already kind of upset at the situations of the call. We weren't allowed to leave our hotel room. We got 1 sack lunch dropped off a day, at which point, and it was just so almost dehumanizing, right? The deliverer knocked on the door. We had to wait 30 seconds to allow for adequate social distancing before we opened the door to get our sack lunch, and then we could eat our sack lunch. And I'd say probably night 6, night 7 was when the self-harm started. The repetitive punching myself in the head for the mistakes, the falling asleep with my face in the pillow because I didn't feel worthy enough to return to the workforce because the coworker in my care died. And now at the end of 2 weeks, exiting that place, I didn't even feel worthy to come back to the job. I did not feel worthy of suicide because I thought it was too easy of a solution and I just needed to live in hell for allowing a coworker to die. And then I had to go back to work. And so we can talk about not only we're not shocked really by the emotions that our patients and our family were experiencing, but it's really easy for us to just kind of breeze over and like, yeah, we were tired, but we were a little more than tired. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I am fortunate enough to sit here and have been through an amazing outpatient program only for first responders, military, and nurses here in Kansas City that John and I can talk about later. But guys, it was not a fun time.
Yeah.
And going back to that isolation, we thought it was the right thing to do. And we can all look back at that time and say, that was really stupid the way we did that. But also, we can also probably acknowledge that we didn't know better at the time. Yeah, we didn't know. We were spitballing. We were trying to just do what we thought was right.
I'm just extremely, That's such a profound story, and I think drives home so many points. And thank you, Jamie, for being so vulnerable and sharing that aspect of it, because I think that it really stresses the effect that all of this has had on us. How many times do you go home from a bad patient call and you're like, man, I should have done this and I should have done this, and we play the shoulda woulda game, right, all the time. And then you add the isolation on top of that. Then you add, the only thing you have is your own thoughts, which never go down a good path when you're in that situation, right? It just, everything compounds. And I think that is also so relevant to the conversation that we're having about violence against us, because yes, everyone out in the public is running through a lot of the same emotions that we are. We're not allowed to express those emotions, or we express them hopefully in very different ways. But people don't know how to control those emotions. They don't know how to control and get a hold of, when your mind starts doing that spiral, how to get out of that situation and bring yourself, right that ship, if you will, when, now, and I hope that now that you did absolutely everything you could have or should have for your coworker in that situation. But in that moment of being in that situation,
You weren't going to tell me any different.
Exactly. Exactly. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Valor Flight Crew podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message from our sponsors.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Thank you to our sponsor, Spectrum Aeromed. Every mission starts with the right equipment. Spectrum Aeromed designs advanced, customizable medical interiors for rotor and fixed-wing aircraft, helping crews care for patients safely and efficiently in the air. Discover more at spectrum-aeromed.com. Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
That wraps up this episode of the Valor Flight Crew podcast. A big thank you to Jamie and Jonna for sharing their experiences, insight, and advocacy on a topic that affects all of us in healthcare and public safety. Conversations like this remind us that safety isn't just about aircraft, equipment, or protocols. It's about people. Supporting each other, recognizing the impact of what we experience, and continuing to push for awareness and change are all part of strengthening our profession. If this episode resonated with you, we encourage you to continue the conversation with your crews, your teams, and your organizations. Awareness and communication are where real change begins. To all our listeners, thanks for joining us for this conversation and your continued support of the Valor Plus platform. Whether you're part of a flight crew or just passionate about the world of air medical transport, we hope you found some takeaways to apply on your next shift. If you haven't already, head over to www.echoflightcrew.org to learn more about the teams and programs that support this community, and be sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss upcoming episodes. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the Valor Flight Crew podcast, where we continue to highlight the people and stories that make this industry great.